Shabbat Shalom. So a Texas rancher is trying to hire a new accountant, and in the final interview, he wants to impress upon this city slicker exactly the magnitude of his ranch, of the herd, so that he can take a measure of how he will respond to what is before him. So he takes this accountant candidate out into his private helicopter, and they fly up over the ranch, over the herd. And the accountant looks down and says, "Yes, it's large." And the Texan says, "Large, large, I know each and every one of these cows. I know exactly all of them." And the accountant says, "Yes, and I can tell you exactly how many there are." He says, "Well, I haven't even shown you my books yet." He says, No, I can look out the window. I can tell you how many cows there are." The Texan says, "Fine, tell me how many cows there are, and you've got the job." The accountant looks out the window, turns back to the Texan and says, "You have 10,735 cows." The Texan says, "That's amazing. How did you possibly do that so fast?" He says, "It was simple. I counted the horns and divided by 2. The Texan was clearly hoping for a greater impression upon the accountant when he would see the herds. But let's be honest, we can call the Texan a rancher. We can be amazed by his private helicopter, but he's still just a farmer, right? I mean, really, is this something that you should be bragging about to a city slicker accountant, somebody who is in a more prestigious professional career? Well, this is exactly the conundrum that we are seeing played out from last week and this week for Jacob, for the sons, for Joseph, and for Pharaoh. There is a fascinating interchange that happens between these different groups as Joseph's family comes to join him in the land of Egypt. Now, Joseph is, as we know, number 2, right? Vice Pharaoh, for lack of a better term. And as VP, he is, prestigious in the nation. You don't get any higher than he is without having been born a demigod in the Egyptian pantheon. This is as high as anyone can possibly climb. His family, on the other hand, tell me about Jacob and sons, the little business in Canaan.
Ranchers, like you said.
They're ranchers, right? They're a little bit of trade. It's mostly ranchers, herders, shepherds. And how are they doing at this moment? Not so well. We're in the midst of a famine, remember? They came down to Egypt precisely in the first place to get food. So clearly they are not sitting pretty up in Canaan during this time of famine. Now, that's all right, no problem. But then how would we expect these country yokels to respond when they come in, they see the pyramids, which remember were already 2,000 years old at this point. They see the Sphinx, which was even older, and they meet not just Joseph, who is second in command of the nation, but they are going to meet Pharaoh as well. What would be the expected response? Oh, all right. I mean, come on. This is like meeting the Queen of England with Elizabeth I, the actual, queen of the empire, or Victoria, who was queen of the largest empire humanity has ever seen. This is big. And yet, Jacob approaches, and it's pretty much, "Howdy, partner, how you doing?" to Pharaoh. And you can feel Joseph cringe, because this is exactly what he was worried about. In a very subtle, so subtle that you might miss it passage, when Joseph is talking to his brothers about moving the family down, he actually takes them aside before introducing them to Pharaoh, and he gives them instructions. Anybody know this little section of the Torah? Because it's beautiful, because it's so real and so contemporary. So Joseph, you can imagine, is looking at his brothers, these, yokels, and he is straightening out their robes and, shmatas, although he gave them a change of clothes, so maybe they're dressed in something a little better now. And as he is trying to rub the dirt off their face and get them to clean their fingernails, he tells them, "All right, so you're going to go meet Pharaoh, and I've worked it out that you guys can come in and have some land. but don't say you work with sheep. All right? Because the Egyptians look down on shepherds. You're going to go nowhere in this country if you say you do sheep. Say you're in the modern language, you're in the agricultural business. Right? You deal with biomechanical meat production on an industrial scale. You know, lambs eat grass, they turn into meat, and then we eat them. He gives them the pep talk to basically hide who they are. Right? Don't say you're a garbage man, say you're a sanitation engineer. And the brothers, what's that?
Put the right spin on it.
Put the right spin. It's not exactly telling them to lie-ish. But this is the great fear of the nouveau riche, isn't it? Here he is, VP, having been brought before Pharaoh at first as a slave. So he remembers very well the humiliation that he felt. He is now second in control. And what could make things go wrong? The country bumpkin family. What if they insult Pharaoh? What if Pharaoh doesn't like them? What if Pharaoh wants to kick them out? Well, I go too. Here I have finally secured my life. I named my kids after it, after all. And now the family's going to embarrass me. Oh. Anyone who has crawled their way up the social ladder the way Joseph has felt, unfortunately, is all too often embarrassed by their family, who have not crawled up the ladder quite the same way. And the brothers come in and introduce themselves to Pharaoh as we're guys that work with sheep. They are blunt. They do not say what Joseph told them to say. It's a blink and you miss it moment in the Torah. But it is one of the most honest things the brothers have ever done, because the brothers have learned that dishonesty is not really a very good policy. They've kind of figured that out after the last few years with everything that's happened since their mistreatment of Joseph. They're not going to go lie to Pharaoh. Why should they lie to Pharaoh? Lying makes things worse. Lying is not going to fix anything. And so they honestly tell Pharaoh who they are. And Pharaoh's response? Great! You know what? The royal flocks could always use better shepherds. If you guys are good at that, I'll put you in charge of that too. They get a promotion. They get a promotion far from humiliating Joseph, who, once they began talking, must have been crawling into the back shadows of the hieroglyphics, hoping that he could just disappear into the inscription. Pharaoh embraces them and says, great. Now, I imagine Pharaoh was probably surprised that anyone would have the guts to be honest to his face. It probably didn't happen all that often in Pharaoh's experience. It's the downside of being a demigod. But the brothers simply were not willing to play the game that Joseph wanted them to play. So too, when Jacob arrives and is introduced to Pharaoh, Jacob is sort of, nice to meet you. And Pharaoh is astounded by this wise, very old for the day man, and indeed Pharaoh praises Jacob far more than Jacob seems to be in awe of Pharaoh. Jacob is just Jacob, and that is good enough for him, and it turns out it's good enough for Pharaoh. The fears of Joseph melt away. Now, it doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes when somebody is a social climber and their family comes in, they do embarrass the social climber, and they do use the wrong fork. They do act the wrong way at the party, and that can be an end, a rupture in the family. Does that mean that they should learn to put on the airs? They should learn to put on the graces? They should learn to put on the mask that such social circles demand? No. Jacob and the brothers have it right. If they need to pretend in order to be accepted, then they need to be somewhere else. Why should they have to fake who they are just so they can have, what, a more affluent life at the behest of Pharaoh? As we talked about just a couple weeks ago, even Joseph is not free, and they can see that Joseph is not free. Is this what they are going to aspire to? They are free farmers back up, shepherds, but it's better alliteration to say farmer. They are free farmers back up in the land of Canaan, and they are just here to wait out the famine. That's it. Why are they going to pretend to be something they're not just so they can make a few more shekels in Egypt? They are willing to be themselves. And that is their strength. And it is that strength that enables them to endure what comes next, what we will read about next week in Parashat Shemot, the enslavement of our people. If we had not come from a group of people that were willing to be themselves despite the circumstances, willing to say, this is who I am, take it or leave it, we would not have been able to withstand the enslavement that eventually comes. We would have disappeared into the slave pits of Egypt, and we never would have reemerged as a nation, as a people, able to walk back to the land of our fathers, able to take possession of the Torah. So that means, whoever you are, be yourself, put no limits on yourself. No. Just have to end with one little footnote. Too often, the idea that one must be true to oneself is used as an excuse to be a jerk. And I need to make sure that that is not the way you are going to walk away from this particular discussion. They are willing to be themselves because they have worked hard and made many mistakes, which they have tried to repair. They have worked hard to become better people. And they are happy with the people that they have become. That is something that is worth preserving and not hiding. Had they still been the wretches that would sell their brother into slavery, the jealous jerk that would cheat his own brother out of an inheritance, had they still been duplicitous and backstabbing to one another, well, then that they shouldn't be proud of and be willing to embrace. That they should be working on until they can finally say that it is only a part of their past. At this point, they have done the necessary groundwork to be good people. Not perfect, but good. And being good, they are not going to pretend that they're not. They're not going to pretend they are something else. So we walk the line, and it's not too hard to find, between hiding ourselves in order to climb up a social ladder that is only leading us away from what is good, and being the jerk that we might want to be, with no self-control, acting impetuously and acting spontaneously upon every whim and instinct or desire that comes through us. Really, there is a large gray area between that most of us are able to find of how to be a decent human being. Not perfect, for none of us are, but decent and good. Allow that decent, good person to be the dominant personality that you share with the world. You will find, more often than not, that other people are relieved that you are not playing those games, that you are willing to just be a decent, good person, and it will give them permission to do likewise, and then more and more. When we stop the games, when we stop cringing and embarrassment, thinking our family will somehow shame us in front of our new friends or new boss, when we allow ourselves to just be the decent, good people that we are, then everything becomes much easier. Shabbat Shalom. And always remember, the decent, good people vastly outnumber those that are not so decent or good.